And we're live.
That is my Philadelphia
All right.
Bolton, if I pronounced it right, Bolton paper route.
Hey, guys. It's welcome to Hardball. Chris Matthews is Hardball, and we've got Congressman Brendan Boyle on from the Pennsylvania Second, the Fighting Second.
Oh
That's
well,
right.
it's great having you on, Brendan. It's been great, Congressman, to have you. You've got a hell of a career going. You're moving ahead. Let me ask you about the regular stuff that people in your constituency in Northeast, and North Philadelphia. The two people died of measles. I mean, that's something we got rid of in grade school at St. Christopher's, where you and I went. I mean, it's like the nuns took care of that. We didn't have to worry about it. I mean, it was all you just
Yeah.
got your shots.
Well, first, I was introduced as being from Pennsylvania's fighting second congressional district, and that is true. But more importantly, for these purposes, I am literally a block away from Chris Matthews' boyhood home, because I live on Kelvin Avenue in Somerton, right down the street from Southampton Road. And now in Congress, I represent about half the city of Philadelphia. One thing, and most of the country will not understand why this matters. Chris will understand why it matters. I have to correct the record on something. I did not go to St. Chris. I went to St. Helena's, or St. Helena's, as sometimes people call it, on Fifth
Really?
Street, because I grew up in Olney, and then
Oh,
moved to
Olney
Somerset.
Broad and Olney. I know it well. I went
So
to
yeah,
high
so
school
and
there.
then, but I've lived in this neighborhood for over 20 years. But in total Philly parochial fashion, even though I grew up in a different Philly neighborhood, when I was running for state rep, I was labeled a carpetbagger because I was coming from a different neighborhood in the Somerton. But so the epitome of all politics is local. But on a very serious issue, on the measles, no one voted for this. In 2024, both presidential nominees, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, visited Pennsylvania more than any other state in the country. It is the biggest battleground state of the seven battleground states. It was all about affordability, costs being too high, and enough people believed the Trump snow job that he would magically bring down costs. Now here we are, not even 2 years later, and the only thing is made great again is measles. I mean, this is absolutely banana republic, weirdo, bizarre stuff. And sometimes the other side will paint Democrats as into weirdo nonsense. And when we had one candidate running a couple weeks ago at a tweet about canceling Thanksgiving, and that's the sort of thing that plays into that perception, that misperception. Well, actually, it's the other side in government that is doing this weirdo, bizarre stuff that has deadly consequences. Because while we've now had the first two measles deaths in Pennsylvania, as we know, I mean, this kind of thing can actually snowball.
How
Before
about
COVID,
polio? How about polio, Congressman? I
yeah,
grew up with polio. Polio it struck Franklin Roosevelt. We worried about it growing up until Dr. Salt came along with the needle with the
Dr.
vaccination.
Jonas Salk from Pennsylvania, other side of the state. And we still have, obviously, Mitch McConnell in the Senate today, whose walk all his life has been affected because he
Yeah.
had polio as a kid. Yeah, these great advances, we didn't face vaccine skepticism until the COVID pandemic. And unfortunately, I think in many ways, socially, economically, health wise, we are still dealing with the awful ramifications of the COVID pandemic. And this is one more area of life in which the pandemic is still affecting us.
What do you make of RFK Jr.? I mean, I think he's sometimes I've sort of written books about his father and his uncle, and I hate to get into that family issue because within that family they can be a pan face sometimes. They don't even like to express an opinion, but clearly he shouldn't be there. Do you think?
I mean, RFK Jr. is deeply unqualified to hold the position that he has. I mean, has some very bizarre viewpoints that now he's in a position of responsibility and doing a lot of damage. The stuff that is happening at NIH and CDC, that's not easy to all of a sudden on January 20th, 2029, just flip a switch and suddenly it'll go back. I mean, I did an event, Chris, right outside CHOP and the University of Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago on all of the millions of dollars of research grants that have been canceled that have affected us right here in Philadelphia. We're talking about discoveries and cures that now are being delayed or stopped altogether because of the damage that they've done over the last couple of years in those areas. So, look, the Trump presidency, Trump 2.0, is damaging our society and our way of government and a way of life in so many ways. I actually think we might look back and say that it's in the health area that the longest term damage is being done.
So you take the House. Let's say Democrats take the House this fall, which seems pretty good right now. That's you've described January 2029, but that means we have some years of this.
Yeah.
What do Democrats do about RFK Jr.?
Well, here's the good news. I mean, I think that, just I'm looking at the date. We are exactly 70 days away from election day, 10 weeks from today. We have the election, thank God. I think that, much like 2018, we have another Democratic wave. I do believe we will win back the House of Representatives. In that case, I would become the chairman of the Budget Committee. You can forget further reconciliation, pushing through bills that have huge tax cuts for billionaires and throw 16 million people off their Medicaid and off their Obamacare. We will be able to use the budget process as a check on this administration. So there are things that we can do, both in terms of domestic policy as well as international policy. I'll give you one big example. In Article 1 of the Constitution, the ability to tax is an inherently Article 1 prerogative.
Sure.
That means it's the legislative branch, it's Congress. With this crowd that's in charge of the House right now, they completely lie down for whatever Donald Trump wants. I've said before, de facto, he is the Speaker of the House. Actually, Donald Trump himself has bragged about this literally while Mike Johnson is standing right next to him, and Johnson doesn't even try to dispute what he says. That will end. So, look, on these longer term things like health, I'm very concerned that they will actually have consequences that last years and decades. The good news is when it comes to other areas of domestic policy, I think you'll see overnight the change because we will now be a counterweight to the executive branch.
You talked about using Article 1, which is the right of Congress, and the due role of Congress to enact tax legislation beginning. All these economic things should begin in the House of Representatives. But what about tariffs? When I worked up on the Hill, when I worked for, Tip O'Neill and everybody, I got to tell you that you had to do, it was the hardest thing in the world to fight with the trade unions over a fast track. It was a hard thing to get to
Yeah.
a trade bill. Now, can you grab that back from the president?
Yeah, I mean,
Like Canada and countries like that we're fighting with for no reason?
there uh, there is no question about it. I mean, a tariff is just a longer word for tax. I mean, no one ever says, "Oh, I don't have a loan on my house. I have something called a mortgage." Well, no,
Yeah.
it's a kind of loan.
Yes.
Um, the same way an auto loan is a kind of loan only backed by your car. Tariff is a tax on an imported good, and I'm someone, Chris, who has supported different tariffs throughout my career. Take the tariff on steel. Well, that's when you're talking about a specific product from a specific industry and against a specific country.
Yeah.
Using again the example that I'm mentioning, a real life example where I've supported the tariff against Chinese steel dumping. Again,
Yeah.
specific country, specific industry. This is craziness. And I
Yeah,
mean,
the trigger price.
yeah,
That was a big fight for Pennsylvania. I knew the Democrats were very serious about protecting uh, a great steel industry in Pennsylvania.
yeah, because I mean, the Chinese were dumping it well below market price just in order to kill our industry. So that's an example, a limited example of when it is appropriate to have a tariff. What Donald Trump is really doing is uniting Democrats of all stripes, because you see it from labor to business people. When you have the AFL-CIO and the trades and the Wall Street Journal editorial page all on the same side,
Yeah.
I mean, that really says something. And then specifically on Canada, this is the single dumbest trade war that we have ever launched. And a lot of people don't know because of all of the conversation about China that's dominated our politics. I would say, ever since the last 20 years, ever since the Soviet Union went away as kind of the boogeyman, China emerged as in our politics as the one that we always cite. A lot of people don't realize Canada and Mexico are by far bigger trading partners than China. China's third. Mexico and Canada are by far the top two. So the sort of economic damage that we're talking that will be done if we really do, unless suddenly there's a pulling back from the brink, which Trump does have a history of doing. If we really do this full scale trade war, the sort of damage that we'll be doing, inflicting on ourselves, will be real and it'll be noticeable pretty quickly.
Let's talk about another part of your role. If you're incoming and you're likely to become chairman of the budget committee under any political scenario I've looked upon, I think it is 30 seats. But let me ask you about this question of debt. I mean, Republicans are historically more concerned about deficit spending and the fiscal realities of that sort of thing. But we have a real debt situation now, $30 trillion, a third of it driven up by Trump himself. A third of the debt is Trump's. It's
Yeah.
hard to believe. And and then you've got the DSA faction in the party that will want to spend more money. And how do you, as chairman, sort of arbitrate that whole thing? How do we deal with the potential debt threat of losing our reserve currency role in the world, where the dollar doesn't run the world, and the threat from the political reality of people who just want more government action, more spending?
Yeah, Republicans love to bemoan the problem of the national debt, and then they prove how much they care about it by adding record levels
Yeah, Dick
to
Cheney
our.
said it didn't.
Yeah.
Dick Cheney, that wonderful politician of lore. I shouldn't say anything about somebody who's gone, but he said publicly the deficit doesn't matter, and that's a
You see,
Republican talking.
and so Chris, since you're a great political junkie, you may remember he said that to Tim Russer on Meet the Press in the middle of pushing one of the two rounds of the George W. Bush Dick Cheney tax cuts. We've now had four different rounds. I have to get all my fingers into the screen. Four different rounds of tax cuts. A lot of our debt problem is actually the missing revenue over the last 25 years. 01, 03,
Yeah,
2017, and now 2025. Just the latest Trump tax bill last summer, which he used to absurdly call his big, beautiful bill, except now it's so unpopular, none of the Republicans ever talk about it. It's in the witness protection program. Um, that bill, according to the Congressional Budget Office, not me, not any Democrat, according to the CBO, that single bill added more to our national debt than any other piece of legislation that ever passed the United States Congress. Now, so having all of said that, look, Republicans, total hypocrites on this issue. They talk about it and they've made it far worse than anyone else. That said, I will say to my fellow Democrats, just because they're total hypocrites doesn't mean that this isn't a real problem. And the fact that we're now north of 100% of our GDP
yeah.
debt representing
We owe
more than,
more than we make.
yeah.
We owe more than we make. Yeah.
Yeah, as bad as it is now, my God, looking at the projections over the next 10, 15, 20 years, it gets far worse. So the reality is we have to deal with this situation whether we like it or not. And there's a trend, a very frustrating trend over my basically going back to when I was in middle school. And that is 3 straight times now we've had Republican president screws up the economy. Democratic president comes in either in the midst of a deep recession or borderline depression. So we had that with Bill Clinton in 1992, turns it around, turns deficits into growth and actually budget surplus by the late 90s. 2008, George W. Bush screwed up so badly. We have the Great Recession. And we're looking at the highest unemployment since the 1930s. Obama's able to turn that around slowly but surely. to the longest period of economic growth in our history. Joe Biden comes in 2020, the midst of a pandemic and the highest unemployment we've seen since the Great Recession. Well, I do believe 2028 will be the fourth time in my lifetime that we're going to have a Democratic president coming in having to clean up the mess of a Republican predecessor.
But
You
you
know
got
what?
some really bad options. Like options are A, cut military spending, raise taxes, or cut Social Security and Medicare.
Well, now
Like,
I do want to correct something that Republicans, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do want to just correct the record on something. When we're talking about the $40 trillion of debt, do you know how much Social Security has added to that debt? Not one dime. Not one dime. Social Security has actually brought in more in revenue over its lifetime than it has paid out in expenses. The trust fund is good for at least another 8 years, although we do run into a shortfall in the early to mid 2030s. Probably 2034 is the latest projection. I am telling you that yes, we do have difficult decisions out there, and I'm about to write an op-ed on exactly this point. The missing tax revenue is actually a big part of the problem that had we just left in place the rates of the late 1990s, we would be in a much more positive situation. And that is the single biggest cause today of our out of control deficit and debt.
Let me ask you about the Iran war, because even though Trump is not on the ballot, he says he's going to be on the ballot spiritually, but this Iran war, it reminds me, and I've been doing a lot of work on this, of what happened with Jimmy Carter. They know how to make America hostage. They hold us hostage with the Strait of Hormuz, their failure to do anything on any kind controlling their nuclear program. It clearly looks like they've won this war. And I don't understand how a Republican who said, I'm actually voting against stupid wars. The Democrats have given in to too many wars like Iraq and things like that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be different. Trump got in the Situation Room with a foreign leader, Bibi Netanyahu, and alone by himself believed that killing the Ayatollah would bring down the regime. Instead, it left us with an Ayatollah whose father we killed, whose family we killed, whose face could have been smashed in for all we know. We don't know what's happened to this guy, but he's more ferocious than ever,
Yeah.
and he's not going to quit.
Yeah. 6 months ago, almost exactly to the day, actually, 6 months ago, we were just a few days before what would become the US-Iran war. The average for a gallon of gas was $2.98 a gallon, and we had the Strait of Hormuz open. Now here we are 6 months later, average price of a gallon of gas way north of $4, and projections show climbing instead of coming down. And typically by this time of the year, gas prices are dropping because you're past the peak summer surge. And of course, we have no sign in sight of the Strait of Hormuz opening up. And internally within Iran, this regime was so unpopular within Iran that tens of thousands of brave Iranians had taken to the streets, many of whom were murdered,
Yeah.
and actually paid the ultimate price for speaking out against this regime. That's how internally unpopular it was and losing its grip on power. Now here we are 6 months later, and the Iranian regime is stronger than ever internally. I actually meet, Chris, with a number of people who were in the Iranian diaspora, people who came to America post 1979, some who
Yeah.
came to Western Europe, especially London. These are secular, well-educated folks who hate the Iranian regime, and they hate this war because they see that, the unnecessary deaths that it has caused in Iran, deaths to, of course, our service members. And ultimately, now you have a regime that is stronger internally than ever. So this has been, frankly, I can't think, certainly since going to Iraq, I can't think of a worse U.S. foreign policy decision.
This is one last question, will be a hardball question, but I'm sure you've been through it. If you go to the 67th Ward, or the 58th ward even, or South Philly, parts
Well,
of
Chris, the
no,
67th ward is,
they voted for Trump. They voted for Trump in
yeah.
24.
Chris, do you remember what the 67th ward was? That's prison.
Well, it's also Irish cops anyway. It's good
It
Irish
goes to
cops.
66.
Anyway, it's good cops that have to live in the city. But here's the question: and when you talk to Fitzpatrick or the
Yeah.
congressman from Bucks County next door, or you talk to you bump into David McCormick or John Fetterman, even these people are on the other side of this issue. They are effectively Trumpy, and they effectively bought the argument that he was going to end stupid wars. And now they're confronted with a war that may never end in our lifetime. We don't know if it's going to end. We don't think the Ayatollah is going to end it. And what do they say? How do they justify their vote?
Yeah. So I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but
I know you're not interrupting me. I'm giving you the chance to answer. What do they say when you say you voted against stupid wars and look what you've given us?
yeah. Well, first, just to clarify, Philly is divided into 66 wards. And the old joke, if someone went to prison, was they were in the 67th ward. So up here,
Okay, that was 66B.
that's right. So right across the boulevards, the far northeast, it's a 66 ward A.
Andalusia.
Yeah, and then
Andalusia.
you're in the 58th. But I'll just tell you, far northeast Philadelphia is a great example. 250,000 people. If it were its own city, it would be one of the largest cities in Pennsylvania. Um, Donald Trump carried far northeast Philadelphia by 1 percentage point. The state Senate candidate, who was a Republican, also won it by just over 1 percentage point, and I was able to win it by 11. A lot of swing voters reside in Lower Bucks and Fitzpatrick's area, as well as far northeast Philadelphia. I got to tell you, Trump has dropped like a rock in these areas. I do public events pretty frequently, do these shredder events, privacy fairs where people bring their documents that have their social security numbers on them, a lot of older people. And these are largely white middle class swing voters who voted narrowly for Biden in 2020, voted narrowly for Trump in 2024. They are unbelievably pissed off because those who had one guy the other day at something was just at Wawa, and he said, you know, what the hell is this guy doing? I voted for him. And I won't use the exact words he used because it's probably family Substack. But he said, I'll clean it up. I didn't vote for this crap. I voted to get out of the Middle East, and now here we are deeper than ever.
Yeah.
If you're a Republican running right now, that's the problem you have. All of the stuff that the 2024 election was about, staying out of foreign forever wars, bringing down costs, making things in general more affordable. Trump has failed on every single one of those things. And in fact, we've gone in the opposite direction.
Congressman, you're a very impressive fellow. I wish you well, and I expect you'll be chairman of the Budget Committee next year. I think the Senate might even switch. It's very close, and very close. And I wish you well, whether you run for the Senate or whatever you're going to do. There's so many things out there for you. But remember, if you give up the House seat, you give up the House seat to run for the Senate. This is a very tricky business you're in because you want to hold on to what you're going to be a member of the leadership someday. I think the way things are going, and it's whatever you decide. Good luck. I wish you well. And you're very impressed. You know your stuff, really. I mean, I
appreciate
think
it.
you're one of the best guests we've had. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. I'm glad all those years watching Hardball paid off. Chris.
Well, I didn't beat Josh Eilberg in the old days, so I never got to go where you're going. Thank you so much, Brendan Boyle, Congressman Boyle. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Getting our next guest, who's a Hardball classic. Boy, that is shocking about 2 people dying in Pennsylvania from measles. Can't believe that's actually happening. Some of our audience are very concerned about that and whether. And here's our next guest, John Feehery.
Feehery. How do you spell Feehery, by the way?
Feehery.
Okay, Feehery, like it's phonetical. It's the way it
like
sounds.
It's like the Feehery theory. Yes,
that's that's a Substack.
That's my Substack.
I love your haircut. Anyway, we're going to get started here. No, it's good. Are we ready?
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Okay, let's get on, John. You were in communications with the Republican leadership of the House, and I was in I had a title AA, but basically my job was to sell Tip O'Neill versus Ronald Reagan day after day after day. Let's talk about what's going on now with Iran and Iraq, or Iran and Israel. It seems to me that the Iranian leadership, the Revolutionary Guard, uh, and the Ayatollah, whose father we killed, are out to get us, and they have got us captured. They seem to understand our media. They just like under Carter, we had America held hostage, and Nightline and Cronkite every night saying how many days have passed that we've had the hostages taken. These guys are on television. The foreign minister, the president, the Ayatollah, the Revolutionary Guard, they're all on American television. They know exactly how to send their message, and they're sending the message to screw us. Your thoughts? What do we do with it?
Well, this is like a hostage crisis, and the hostage crisis is, instead of the hostages of what your old boss was dealing with, the hostages is the Strait of Hormuz, and that's the real issue. And how do you deal with that? And I think the Iranians have no interest in cutting a deal until after the election. And the choice for the president is try to strangle them economically or go full force, and take out the regime again. And neither of those are great solutions. But the Iranians are tough hombres, and they've been around for a long time. And I think that, I wish the president had listened to J.D. Vance and other members of the administration that, this is not going to be a great idea. It's not going to be an easy solution. And we don't have to do this right now. But he went in. And so the question is, do you try to finish the job? Do you just continue to bumble along? I think we're kind of in a political purgatory right now. Now, the good news is that gas prices have not dramatically gone up. They've gone up, but they have not dramatically gone up. They're certainly not at the levels that were during the Biden administration. The casualties haven't been that bad. I mean, we've lost 18 soldiers. That's terrible, but it's not like what happened in Iran or Iraq. And most people aren't really paying attention to it. They're paying attention to their own daily lives. And, the question for this election is, how can the president possibly turn, it into not into a referendum, but into a choice. And, the Democrats have kind of made their own problems. They've nominated a bunch of people that, especially this guy in Michigan, El Sayed, that the Republicans can run against. And, this is a real challenge for the Democrats. If you look at what's going on with them, they have a lot of their own real profound issues. And so that's what they're dealing with. But, it's not looking great for the Republicans right now. I get that, but it's not all lost either. And I think the president still has a chance to kind of recast this after Labor Day, which is when elections typically start.
You have a sense that Karl Rove and I had a debate out in California at a club out there, Pacific Union Club. And he said the Republicans have this wonderful ability to come up in the last 6 weeks of an election to start a fire in reverse if it looks bad. For example, they used the case of the guy, I'm not going to use his name, but there was a congressman down in West Palm Beach, Florida, who had he had an untoward interest with pages. And we got involved with that. And he said, we took that and made that a major national issue. We, of course, have had Willie Horton. We've had the Swift boat. Do you think they're going to make an issue out of El Sayed, the candidate in Michigan, as a classic example of a left wing, if you will, candidate that besmirches the image of the whole Democratic Party? What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I think that's what they're going to do, and I think it's not going to just be El Sayed. It's going to be other kind of this woman in Florida, Angie Nixon. There's just a lot of places where you can kind of pick at where the Democrats are going and ask the question, what do the Democrats want to do if they take up power? And, what they clearly want to do is, you saw Hakeem Jeffries yesterday with his New York Yankees hat, talk about, we're going to hold Trump accountable, which means they're going to spend their time going after Trump and trying to impeach him. And I don't think that's
do you think they're that shallow that they will go for an impeachment rather than using the subpoena power to go after the grifting, the grabbing of money by the president and by his family? Wouldn't that be, are they that stupid, do you think? Or do you
I
One
think
just
they're
leads
want
to
it?
the other.
Or do you
I
want
think
it
they're
to?
gonna do. I think they're gonna do both. I
Yeah.
think they're gonna try to do both. And I mean, the problem that you're gonna have is they're gonna spend all of their time focused more on Trump than they are about trying to come up with their own, brand and figure out what they want to do for the voters. And there are a couple things. I don't know if you saw this, but Jared Kushner met with Hakeem Jeffries.
I
Now
did. So
there's a lot,
why did Jeffries meet with him?
there's a lot of speculation that they were trying to Kushner was trying to cut his own deal,
Yeah.
say lay off me and focus on somebody else because that's kind of just what some people think. Other people think, hey, there's some grounds here that you can find, some places to get some common ground. You can do something on immigration reform that you can't really do with a Republican
Well,
Congress.
yeah, but that would be a wonderful idea if they actually did. Look, I look at immigration this way. Uh, Nobody likes the picture we got from well, certainly killing people in the streets, which I think are very. That woman, I think, was driving away from that ice guy, not toward him. But I think the idea of the border being closed hits most people as about time. We had 10 plus a million people coming in the country under Biden. Slam that door for a while, and we'll try to figure out our situation. The Democrats would be smart, and they're not, of saying, now that you've slammed the door shut, why don't we make a program where, how about this? You come in the country to work for 4 or 5 years legally. It used to be called a Bracera movement. You come in to pick crops, which we need, or you come in for some other program. And after 4 or 5 years of obeying the law, you got a path to citizenship. Something where people come in the country legally to work, not to stay. And they fill the job requirements. It can be summer jobs. It could be picking jobs in the agriculture world. It would make so sense, and then say, after you've obeyed the law for 4 or 5 years, we're going to put you on a list where you can actually work toward a citizenship. Instead, the Democrats say they don't want to do anything about the border, really. And the Republicans say we're going to throw everybody out, which they can't do. We've got millions of people in this country illegally. They're not going to get thrown out. It's not going to happen. It's just going to be a bunch of trouble from ICE. Why don't they make a deal? And I'm talking about the Democrats too. Make a deal.
Well, I don't think the Democrats want to make a deal because I don't think they can figure out any way to cut any deal with a president they think is a criminal.
Yeah, that's entirely true. Like, there's
And
no
so,
deal that they can make with Trump.
Well,
I
they
mean,
have to. Well, then they're going to let this situation reside back in. If they ever get back into office with a president, they're going to find themselves with a border. Are they going to police the border like Trump or not do it? And then he asked the Democrats, are you going to patrol the border or just let it go again like Biden did with Chinese and everybody else coming in the country? I'm telling you, it's an issue in working class areas in Pennsylvania. We just had somebody on from Pennsylvania. It is a big issue in places like Ohio. It's not just border counties. It's real. People don't like people coming in the country illegally, especially when they're competing for jobs. They don't
Yeah,
like
and that's also not just with the white working class; it's also with the black and working class,
Yeah,
and it's with it's the
Hispanics too.
large parts of the Hispanic working class. They don't want competition from
So you're
illegal
making
labor.
the case for the Democrats to do something.
Well, if they should have done this in 2006 when George Bush was president, because Bush was someone who desperately wanted
He did.
immigration reform, and Nancy Pelosi focused on other things. She didn't really want to do that because they don't think that this helps them with their voters, and their voters want to get rid of ICE. They don't want any kind of border security. I mean, you saw this with Joe Biden.
I know what I know. Look, I went through this with Tip O'Neill. I actually worked for Tip O'Neill, and I got to tell you what happened. He would check with the Hispanic leadership, and they'd say no. And he went and did it. He did Simpson Mazzoli anyway, and that wasn't effective. But it seems like any reasonable person make a list, not the New York Times, maybe, but list the reasons that Biden lost the election with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris lost. I think race played a role, but you can't argue about that because people don't change their minds. But it was the economy, it was immigration, and it was the whole thing about the cultural issues of the transition people. And clearly those are things on people's minds. Democrats have to address those issues. So this time they'll say affordability. They have a new word for it. That's smart. That's Mandani. They'll talk about affordability, gas prices, blah, blah, blah. But they're not doing anything on immigration.
Yeah,
Nothing. And the
yeah. I
Supreme
mean,
Court, they
if I
went
were
the other way. With the Supreme Court got a little tough on the trans issue, fairly or not, but they did in the states that were had the law in that direction. But it doesn't seem like Democrats have corrected their problem, and we're going to go into an election in 28 with the same old problems again. Maybe a weaker Republican candidate like JD or Marco, maybe a weaker candidate, but if they have the same issues, it could be the same election again. Trouble.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I would say that when Denny Hastert became Speaker in 1999, and we thought that the Republican brand was very weakened after trying to impeach Bill Clinton,
Yeah.
we came up with some things that we could work with Clinton on to help recast our image and look us like a responsible governing party that could actually cut deals and move to the center. I don't think that's where the Democrats are, but I think that that's what Kushner was trying to probe with Jeffries.
Kushner goes into every room and he comes out of every room with a check. I'm sorry. Every time he goes overseas to negotiate on our interests, right, he comes back with a myth. Why is he? Oh, there's another thing I want to talk about. You wait a minute. What do you mean? There's another thing I want to talk about? You shouldn't have another thing. You should have the interests of the United States, our national security, and that's it. You don't have any other mission. He's got another mission.
Well, he doesn't work for a government.
Those guys are making money. Trump's making a lot of money. Trump made $2 trillion on the crypt market, whatever the hell that is. And I'm telling you, anyway, I want to ask you about your party. What survives? Let's assume Donald Trump serves out the term. He leaves office. He has a farewell address. He gets his candidate possibly elected president or not elected president or nominated at least. Will this go on, MAGA?
I think in a different form. I think that this is my prediction, Chris, that J.D. Vance will get the nomination. They'll pick Marco Rubio to be his vice president, and you'll have two wings of the party kind of come together. And
how's that work? How does that work? Do they agree that he won the election in 2020, for example, that January 6th are attacking the Capitol and shooting or whatever, ransacking the place was fair business?
I think that largely
expression.
I don't think Republicans are going to talk about 2020. One of the great things about having Trump leave the stage is he's really the only one who keeps talking about 2020. That wasn't something that implicated either.
Well, if I'm a reporter on the beat and I get the candidate running in 28 or 20 or 32, and I ask Marco Rubio, did Trump win the 2020 election?
I think you say he won the 2024 election, and we're going to move on and talk about the
he can do it. He doesn't have to say 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nobody cares about
nobody. You keep asking nobody, but when you ask the candidate a question, Democrats are hit with this all the time. Do you believe in evolution? I've done that, and they got to go. Oh, I don't know. You can ask the Democrats in 28. Do you believe in closing down the Pentagon? Do you believe in getting rid of the borders? Do you believe all this idiotic stuff that is being pushed by some people in the DSA? They're going to have to answer those questions. You have to answer.
Yeah, no.
Orders set the questions. They have to find the answers, but they can set the question. Do you believe that Trump was right when he insisted that every employee of the federal government said he won the 2020 election, and he's still doing it by all this stuff with the Supreme Court? He's still trying to win that argument.
Yeah, I mean, Trump is definitely trying to still win the argument, which is why most Republicans are being quiet on it or trying not to say anything. But, by 2028, that's going to be long history. I mean, 8 years is a long time. And, the reporters might ask.
So David McCormick, who wants to be president in Pennsylvania, or any of the other guys competing for the presidency, will be asked by a decent reporter, do you believe Trump's right when he insisted that nobody works for the federal government unless they believe I won the election in 2020? Will he answer that question?
I think he'll answer it in Dave McCormick style, which is he'll be very honest and forthright. I mean, I think McCormick's a pretty straight guy, and he has no great, axe to grind with Trump or against Trump. I mean, McCormick and Fetterman are like best pals. I wouldn't be surprised if Fetterman.
That's what I'm worried about. That's what I'm worried about Fetterman. Do you think Fetterman's going to switch?
I think he might. I think the Republicans would be happy to have him. And I think that
can he win a Democratic primary being so pro-Israeli the way he is?
Not right now. No. Although, the question is, what happens to Josh Shapiro? I mean, is he running for president? And how's his race looking? You can tell me better than I know, but
he has. Look, John, he has what every politician wants more than anything else: luck. He has incredible luck. He drew a guy last time who was so anti-abortion that even in Pennsylvania, which is reasonable about it, they have like 23 weeks or something. They're a reasonable state if you have to look at it in political terms, not moral terms, but political terms. But Gary, this new woman running against him, he's going to sweep her probably 60 points. 60 points.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, she's won statewide a couple times, and she's done pretty well. I know that she doesn't have a lot of money, but Shapiro has his, Shapiro's got this data center thing. You're probably right, but I don't think he's going to get 60. I think he'll get 55, and I think Garrity's probably in better shape than commonly noted. And we'll see. You know Pennsylvania better than I do, and
I don't know that. I mean, I would only say that I think that she pushes extremism, and that's going to hurt her. Pennsylvania is against extremism. Pennsylvania is a Bill Scranton state. It's a Tom Ridge state. It's not an extreme state. It's a regular country. What I love about the state I grew up in, it's a real part of the United States. It's got the left in Pittsburgh and Philly and in Harrisburg, and the rest is red basically. And it's just like the country looks. Look at a map of the United States. It's California, Oregon, Washington State, and then way over the other side, except for Chicago, it's red as hell.
Yeah. Well, I know that's why Republicans, have a better and even shot sometimes at winning statewide, which is what McCormick did, and why Fetterman's thinking about changing parties. So we'll see.
Let's put some money down. Let's not money. I can't bet money because it'll screw up my commentary. But here's one. I think Democrats win 30 seats in the House. What do you think?
I think it's going to be about 15. They'd have to sweep every toss up to win 30 seats. I know that. I just kind of looked at the map very closely. On Monday. And they have to, the Republicans are going to pick up 10 seats because of redistricting. So that makes it very difficult for them to get the 30 seats you're talking about. And I think that the control of the House will be within 10 seats either way.
Yeah, I'll call you after. I'll call you after.
Yeah,
I'll call you after. But the other question is, when I look at the Senate, it is very wobbly. I mean, I think Cooper looks good in North Carolina. I do think Troy Jackson will win in besides marrying his cousin. I think he's going to do well in Maine. It's a strange issue. It's a Catholic issue, as you know, second degree of kindred. Do you know, John, how this works?
I know.
You're not supposed to get any closer than second cousins. But I look at I want Sherrod Brown to win, so I admit I got a thumb on the scale there. I want him to win. But I look at down at Tellerico running the best campaign ever run down there against in modern times against Republicans. And I look at up in Maine, in Alaska, and I look in Iowa. I think they could win 6, lose 2. They could lose Michigan and even New Hampshire and still win the Senate. What do you think?
We'll see. I mean, you might be right. I think that Tellerico is going to lose. I don't think Paxton's not a great candidate, but Texas is Texas. I think Sullivan,
Would you vote for Paxton? Would you vote for Paxton?
Yeah, I'd vote for Paxton. Absolutely. I'd vote for Tellerico. And,
really?
Absolutely. Most Philadelphians from that voted Trump would vote for Paxton over Tellerico. Tellerico is creepy.
Well, tell me how you dive down in that one. I don't think he is because I've seen him speak. But what do you think? Why is he creepy?
Well, he's just not Texas. He's against the oil and gas industry. He's against meat. He's against everything that Texas stands for. And he's trying to promote himself as some sort of new age Christian. I just don't buy it. And talking about people who are against their interests, Peltola is also against the oil and gas industry, and that's the biggest employer in Alaska. I mean, obviously Sullivan's got to figure out the Sullivan problem, which is too many damn Sullivans.
Explain for the regular people out there who are not junkies. What's the Sullivan problem? Because it reminds me of the Russo problem from '46 with Kennedy. It's when you name your main opponent's name and you give that name to it. You find a guy with the same name and put him on the ballot.
Yeah, I mean, there's a guy. There's a funny story here because Dan Sullivan's the senator, and the Democrats found a Dan Sullivan who's a Democrat and turned Republican just to run for this seat, and he got like 3 or 4 points in the election because people were confused. And then there's a mayor of Anchorage who's named Dan Sullivan who just endorsed the real Dan Sullivan. So there's a lot of. I mean, remember that old movie about the Sullivans in the Battle of Wake Island or something when they died in the all the Sullivans who died in the crash in the plane whatever happened in World War II. This kind of reminds me of this. There's just too many Sullivans in this race. And then you look at
there was a ship that carried
Yeah.
two service people that four of them died. It was like a
four of them died. Yeah,
horrendous, beyond belief.
yeah,
Yeah.
terrible for
Well,
the family.
you're an Irish American like me, and I do pay tribute to you, although you're wrong about Rico. Anyway, anyway,
But I get one. I got one question to ask.
Chris Peleo has a
Hi. Today we're going to have in South Carolina is kind of a weird Senate race. What are your thoughts on on whether Graham can Trump push Graham over the finish line to make it, or is this going to be a Ralph Norman thing? Because they look really closely tied. That debate did not do her any favors.
Yeah, she's a new candidate who hasn't. I mean, I thought she answered it pretty well at the day after, which was people in South Carolina don't spend a lot of time thinking about Taiwan. And I'm not a typical politician. I'm not a real politician. I think that was a pretty good answer for her. I mean, the problem with Ralph, obviously Graham is not seen as being that conservative, and Ralph Norman is very conservative. And so you have Graham, who's much more loyal to President Trump than Norman has been. Norman has not been that loyal to Trump. So the question is this what matters more, loyalty to Trump or loyalty to the conservative cause? And Norman is much more conservative, loyal to conservative, and at times has clashed with Trump because Trump is not conservative enough. I mean, I think that South Carolina, it's a party state. It's they have a very smart political apparatus there, and Trump is still pretty well liked. And Lindsey Graham was able to win election after election after election, even though he was not necessarily that conservative, and also he was an internationalist. So, Graham has all the benefits of Lindsey's political apparatus, which is really outstanding. Norman is much more conservative, much less loyal to President Trump.
So, Colin, who wins?
Yeah.
Well, that's a long explanation for me. I don't really know. I think that Graham wins.
You think Graham wins? Okay.
I got to end with thank you, John, so much for coming. I got to tell you a Lindsey Graham story before you go. Now, you know, and I, we always gotten along. We always will get along. You and I always thought that happens a lot on Capitol Hill, even today on Capitol Hill. A lot of friends. One of my friends was Lindsey Graham. And I known him a long time, way back when he was with John McCain, and he was, I thought, a good guy politically. But I always got along with him. He has a great sense of humor about everything. So one time I'm at a speech by this president of Colombia, the country of Colombia, and I'm sitting here very attentively watching the speech, and all of a sudden a guy behind me puts his arms around my back, around my shoulder. And I said, Lindsey, no matter how bad you are, I still like you. And he said, no matter how bad I am, I still like me. I thought that was the greatest explanation of Lindsey Graham because he had made so many switches in his life. But I always liked his sense of humor, and I'm sorry, I'm guilty of I like people up close that you can't see at a distance. Anyway, thank you, John Feehery. You're a great guy, and you did what I did for a living. If not,
yeah, thanks for having me on. Hey, Chris, let me make one last point, real quick.
Sure.
Trump's going to be in Ireland, and I think he should be pushing for Irish unification. I think it'd be a good.
Oh well, I love that. You know, when I think about the strange, here's what John's getting at is the number of Catholic families in Northern Ireland, which is still in part of the United Kingdom, is getting up higher and higher. It may have passed the number of Protestants, and so, but there are some nationalist or whatever Catholics who would like to stay a member of the UK. It's tricky, but I do think that they should get the law as a first step. They should form some kind of coalition. They've got an open border, which is a good thing. I love having the open border over there. I've applied for my Irish citizenship, so I will have a say, John. I will have a say in this to some extent. I'm keeping my citizenship, obviously, but I do care about that country, and I do think it would be. They still honor this interesting thing. They still honor anybody born in Ireland, the island of Ireland, including the North, you're eligible for citizenship. If your grandmother, my grandmother was like that. And I think that's something that is very interesting in our Constitution, that they do recognize all of Ireland, and it'd be great to be together. But that would mean the end of the United Kingdom, because it's the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So what would be and then the
And
way,
Wales.
well, I introduced Margaret Thatcher one time. I wrote it for Speaker O'Neill, introducing her as the Prime Minister of Great Britain. That wasn't including everybody. That just included Wales and England and Scotland, but it did not include Northern Ireland. I think she may have been offended by it, but I got away with it. Thank you, John.
All right. We'll talk to you guys later.
John Feehery, thanks so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Well, that's a good duo.
Yep.
Two Irish guys. It was a good duo, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot, especially from Brendan Boyle. Sharp cookie. He knows his stuff. He may be headed for more, but as I pointed out, if you have to give up the House seat to go for the Senate. It's just one of the things you have to do. It's tricky, very dangerous. Okay, thank you, Chris, and thank you everybody for watching Substack. It's great to have you as an audience. Thank you.